Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, it's that extra special once per season time of specialness where we get to have a look into the patch notes and prepare our brains for what is to come. We've had a lot of information come down the pipeline about Season 3 recently, including the release of a 7-minute video from the developer team themselves talking about the new season. Then of course today we had the full-blown patch notes released after getting a sort of overview about them last night on the developer update stream, so let's talk about the little tidbits of new information that were in that 7-minute trailer video and then dive into the patch notes proper themselves. As far as the video then, this was mostly just a fancier, more set way of showing a lot of the more information that we'd already knew about Season 3, but there were a couple of specific tidbits that we learned here, which are that the Governing Stones, which are the seasonal power-up that defines the skills your construct uses, mostly come from the questline itself, whereas the Tuning Stones, which are the augmentations for the skills, come from the seasonal activity itself. We also learned that these stones have their own individual levels that define the power of their effects too, so that is a seasonal grind for us to actually partake in more longer term. And we also got more clarification on the vault activity specifically, and that you lose stacks of Zoltan's warding both from deaths, but also if you get hit by a trap at any given point in the dungeon. So it really is a sort of bet on yourself to be effective and to dodge the things that matter. That's honestly all the new information that we got from this 7-minute video though, really. So with that aside, let's dive into the meat of today's discussion, patch 1.3. Right off the bat, at the top we have our 6 new unique items and our 7 new legendary aspects as well. As expected, this is split into 1 unique available to everyone, then 1 specific to each class, and 2 legendaries that are available to everyone, with also 1 specific to each class. The class agnostic unique then is the Pain Gorger's Gauntlets, a pair of gloves damaging enemies with a non-basic skill marks them for 3 seconds. First basic skill that hits a marked enemy is echoed to all marked enemies, dealing up to 200% increased damage. Essentially, this is for your basic skill focused builds out there, and this should actually be nutty strong for those builds. Think of something like Druid Stormclaw, for example, where Hurricane will constantly apply the marks to things in range, then your basic skill Shredding will just jump to every enemy. That's crazy good in the right build for sure. Then we have the Ring of the Ravenous for the Barbarian specific unique. Ren's duration increased by 2 to 4 seconds. Damaging enemies with brawling skills applies 2 stacks of bleed once per 4 seconds on each enemy, and this is pretty solid. Sort of goes hand in hand with charge as a brawling skill, so I can definitely see a bleedy charge build coming into view from this. Then we have the Druid unique. We saw this one in the stream. Lightning Storm grows twice as fast and strikes a bonus time every time that you crit, also dealing bonus damage. This one is going to be exceptional, definitely going to be used quite a bit for sure. Then we have Necromancer's unique, the Mutilator plate. You are Bloodlanced, and when Bloodlance would deal damage to you, it fortifies you and has a chance to form a blood orb. And Bloodlance also just deals more damage in general. If I'm reading this correctly, you basically just count as one of your own Bloodlance targets for the purposes of deciding buffs, and you just get the passive permanent fortified generation from this. So defensively speaking, definitely not bad at all, and the increased damage is great for a Bloodlance build for sure. After that, then we have the new rogue specific unique, the Beastfall Boots. When you cast an ultimate skill, your next core skill consumes all of your energy and deals 0.5 to 1.5% increased damage per energy consumed, and using cooldowns restores 5 energy. So put simply, this is extremely strong. Like genuinely, I can see this becoming an absolute staple in a death trap type build, for example, where you're just resetting the cooldowns of your ult constantly so that you get this bonus more frequently, which then nukes everything in the area. This is definitely a really solid one. Then the last new unique for Sorcerer, we also saw this one on the stream, but this makes Meteor have charges and charge cooldowns instead of a mana cost. Makes it drop additional meteors when you use it, and also has its enchantment and enhancement also drop a bonus meteor when they happen. So this has real potential too. Then we have our new 7 legendary aspects, starting with the class agnostic 2. There's the aspect of adaptability. When cast below 50% maximum resource, basic skills generate 3 primary resource once per cast. Or if at 50% or above resource, basic skills deal up to 80% bonus damage. So this combined with the class agnostic unique has a very high potential for basic skill focused builds this season for sure. Then we have the Juggernauts aspect, a defensive, gain a flat armor bonus that will scale with item power of course, but your dodge button has double cooldown, and this could entirely be worth it in some situations for some builds. We have to see how it scales with levels. After that we have the Barbarian specific new unique, aspect of Sundered Ground. Every 25 seconds upheaval is guaranteed to overpower and deals bonus damage, and the timer is reduced when upheaval overpowers a boss or elite. Pretty solid for an upheaval focused overpower build for Barbarian, which will definitely be more competitive of a build with the bug to hammer the ancient being fixed now. Then we have Druid's new legendary, the Virulent aspect. When rabies infects an enemy, its cooldown is reduced, tripled when infecting elites. Basically just creates a possible potential of infinite rabies cycling and increasing growing poison ticks attacks if you have a big enough group of enemies to funnel it around through. I love the concept of this, but I'm not sure exactly how well it will work in action until we see it properly in game. Then we have Shattered Spirits aspect for the Necromancer. Casting Bone Spirit also launches 18 bone splinters, dealing significantly increased damage and generating essence per enemy hit. It seems pretty solid to me, especially with the Bone Spirit changes that we have in other places as well. Then we have the Rogue-specific legendary Resistant Assailants aspect. Breaking Concealment grants 10% resistance and maximum resistance to all elements for 4 seconds, and killing an elite enemy reduces the cooldown. This is definitely a pretty solid defensive aspect, definitely more unique from the other ones at Rogue's disposal, and while this doesn't really do anything offensively, Rogue is getting a lot from other places for that in this patch. Then the final new item is the Sorcerer legendary, the aspect of Shredding Blades. Ice Blades chance to apply vulnerable increased by 20%, the duration increased by 4 seconds, and you get up to 25% increased vulnerable damage as a multiplier too, so on that alone it's honestly pretty damn solid. Multiplicative vulnerable damage is a rare commodity these days, so getting that much of it is great. Past that then we have some changes to existing items to talk about as well. The Ring of Starless Skies Uber Unique was pretty much unused before by anyone who had it, but now it might actually be one of the best Uber Uniques that we have. Now spending resources reduces resource costs and increases damage done by 10% for 3 seconds, stacking up to 40% on both. This lost the conditional part of the effect from before that made it pretty unusable, and gained an up to 40% damage multiplier on top of that. Stonks way up on this one for certain. Then we have the aspect of the Expectant, now just giving a timer on how long the buff lasts. Then one more Uber Unique, the Melted Heart of Selig. All stats affix now at double value, which is pretty big. Core skill damage changed to movement speed, which I think is a genuinely solid choice to make for this specific Uber Unique. Damage while healthy increased to 3 times the original value is absolutely nasty, and then the power itself was slightly changed as well. Now you gain 60 maximum resource instead of 30, but only 75% of incoming damage turns into resource drain instead. That said, the resource drain is also lower, so instead of making you straight up immortal, this is just now an extremely strong defensive item, especially for builds that don't normally want to use the resources. The cost of the drain is lowered, so you don't have to build around it as much, and the actual statistical bonuses of it offensively are way better now too. Basically, it's less gimmicky and more just all-around effective, I would say. After that, we had some Barbarian specific item updates too. The aspect of Echoing Fury, now not multi-scaling multiple active shouts, but having a higher base value of resource gain. Limitless Rage now having a duration limit. Veteran Brawler has had its damage increase reduced preemptively thanks to some changes to charge, of course, as has the aspect of Ancestral Charge. Encroaching Wrath had its damage bonus nerfed, and it also now has a duration limit, and the Ring of Red Fur also a duration limit, all that basically just to sort of try and slow down barbs from prepping a million buffs so that they can one-shot a boss when they walk up to it like it's nothing. Then Druid also had some class-specific item updates. Aspect of the Blurred Beast now doesn't specifically scale off of the poisoning damage applied to enemies. This was double-dipping damage numbers, and they decided it needed to be altered a bit. Metamorphic Stone got a spirit cost reduction, which is great to see. Unsatiated gets spirit generation and bonus damage buff. Not bad, but it wasn't really used much beforehand, and I don't think this will change it a crazy amount. Then Aspect of Retaliation gets a 10% maximum damage potential nerf, so this is actually a rather big hit right here, as this is in a ton of Druid builds. We've also got some Necro-specific item updates. The aspect of Swelling Curse was talked about on the developer stream, changed it to remove the range requirements, and it's definitely just better with the way they changed it. Torturous Aspect has been completely reworked. Iron Maiden is now a darkness skill that does shadow damage, and enemies affected have up to a 25% chance to be stunned when they deal damage. Rotting Aspect Corpse Spawn chance increased dramatically, and then Hulking Aspect chance to reduce Golem's active cooldown doubled, as well as Corpse Spawn chance doubled too. Then we reach our largest pile of actual pure item updates for one specific class, which belongs to Rogue, who got a pretty big focus from the Hand of Balance in this patch. Blade Dancer's aspect had some pretty big changes, no longer having its damage of return blades scale with distance, so you don't have to run away from enemies to use this anymore, but also having one less tick of damage per use. So you do more damage as a base than you did before, but less damage than someone who was playing perfectly before. Then Aspect of Stolen Vigor has been granted 5% damage reduction per momentum stack, bringing this from completely unused to actually pretty damn solid, honestly. We've got Icy Alchemist getting a massive rework. Shadow Imbued Skills get 75% lucky hit chance to release a cold damage explosion with 25% chill. If it hits already chilled or frozen enemies, it does double damage. If the damage on this scales well with item power, it could actually be pretty silly, so we've got to see where it lands. Then we also have a rework to the Toxic Alchemist aspect too, which is now the exact same as that previous one, but for poison triggering off of the Shadow Imbuement instead of cold. We've also then got changes to the ranged uniques. Wind Force just getting its lucky hit chance bonus increased by 10%. Sky Hunter getting crit damage as its inherent affix as if it were a crossbow instead of a bow is a pretty massive change. They've also doubled the value of the crit damage bonus affix on the weapon roll itself, as well as changing the unique effect itself to give more energy than before, and apply a bonus crit damage multiplier when the effect triggers. So this is far better than it was before. Then we have Eaglehorn with a pure effect update, with its new effect being penetrating shot makes enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds, and every 4th cast guaranteed bounces off of walls and scenery, dealing up to 40% bonus damage as a multiplier when this happens. And that is actually sort of nuts. I can absolutely see penetrating shot rogue popping off this season completely. Then our final item changes are for sorcerer specific items: Aspect of Shattered Stars getting a bit of damage change, not too much, Staff of Lam Essen getting an activation chance increase, and then Iceward Brave also getting an activation chance increase here, just numerical shifts. That covers everything to do with items then, so let's dive into the more balance specific session of the classes themselves. Going through this then, there are a ton of just numerical shifts. I will show everything on screen, but I won't necessarily call every little thing out on voice unless I think that it's actually a big enough deal to mention here. First, we have these adjustments to overpower as a whole, just for everyone, basically dropping down the bonuses to overpower damage from your fortify and bonus life to half of their prior effectiveness. This is a pretty big hit to overpower as a damage multiplier, but not massive enough to make it obsolete or anything like that by any means. After that, we have our Barbarian specific changes for active skills. We have the big shift for charge, damage increased by 900%, which is absolutely insane. Charge Barbarian is 100% going to be a thing this season, especially combined with the new items for Barbarian 2, and even another change that I'll be mentioning in a minute that really rounds it off. Charge terrain damage increased a ton as well, and power charge no longer required to have terrain impact to reduce the cooldown of the skill, as well as hitting a boss with this skill just reduces cooldown now in general. Leap has also just had its base damage increased by 30%, which is nice, but it's no charge. Then we have a bunch of passive changes: Brute Force getting a notable nerf, Walking Arsenal getting a nice buff as a key passive, reduced difficulty to activate, higher bonuses for activating it, now a 20% bonus attack speed too, making it a bit more competitive as a key passive. Unconstrained also just got a straight up damage increase, Gushing Wounds as well, basically just trying to bring these up to par with the other main choice and make them actively competitive. On top of this, weapon expertise level requirement just cut by 50%, so it's just a nice convenient thing for Barbarian as a whole. Then we have our Paragon change. The Martial Glyph has been totally reworked, now making shouts reduce the cooldown of all non-shout skills by 4 seconds. So instead of using this glyph to make shouts reduce each other's cooldowns, you now use this to have each shout reduce the cooldown of other things by 4 seconds each time you cast them. For example, a charge build, maybe, where you shout to reduce the charge cooldown. That sounds interesting, right? Then let's round it off by talking Barbarian bug fixes. They fixed Earth Striker so that it no longer triggers the overpower on basic skills, and the other main fix was the bug on Hammer of the Ancients that was basically giving every Hammer of the Ancients Barbarian 30% increased damage for absolutely nothing, just completely for free. This will absolutely hurt Hoda builds, but they will still be super strong, just not quite unchallengeably top as a build in the entire game. After that, let's move on to the Druid. Rabies getting a pretty nice damage bonus here. Lacerate with a cooldown reduction is okay, but the main reason that it wasn't really used before was damage more than anything else really. Prime Lacerate changes to heal you more, which is pretty cool. Cataclysm major damage increase, actually, and Supreme Cataclysm vulnerable increase is fantastic. Cataclysm was already on the cusp of being competitive, but now it is far more so, and it's also great for symbiotic builds too, who trigger it for free. On to passives then, mostly just some numerical increases, minor stuff overall, and then we have some changes to spirit boons that are pretty big. The Thorns boon now boosted by about 300% from its prior values, the maximum spirit boon now being twice as strong, and most importantly, arguably, Avian Wrath is now officially a crit multiplier and not just an additive bonus, and a 30% crit multiplier is of course insanely strong. For Druid's Paragon changes then, Tectonic got a lucky hit chance increase, Poise had a pretty big numerical increase as well, and Wilds had a pretty big bonus to try and buff companions a little bit on the side. As for the Druid bug fixes then, they fixed the tooltip for Envenom so it properly displays as a multiplier now, fixed an issue with Ravens, and then just fixed the tooltip on the Direwolf aspect. Moving on to Necromancer skill changes then, mostly just some statistical moves here, Corpse Explosion getting the biggest shifts with lucky hit chance reduced but damage increased, with Blighted Corpse Explosion getting a bit of a nerf here as well. Bone Spirit gets a nice 30% damage boost, and Dreadful Bone Spirit now scales with your maximum essence, which is great too. Acolyte's Decompose now also adds another option for Necromancer to apply vulnerable, which is nice to have, and then Initiate's Decompose now also gives you a movement speed bonus if you channel for a bit. Dreadful Blood Mist now gives you bonus crit chance instead of defensive bonuses, and Bone Prison now lets minions and players actually walk through its walls. For passives, you just have a sort of tooltip adjustment, nothing major here. Then for Book of the Dead, we have some changes to the sort of companion AI of golems at its base, as well as in addition to the AoE of basic attacks of the Blood and Iron Golems too. For Paragon changes, the Cult Leader node has been changed to now scale the damage bonus increase off of your minion's attack speed bonus, which of course scales with your own personal attack speed, so that's a fun interaction now. Then as for Necro bug fixes, this is mostly just minor things, however they have fixed an interaction with the splintering aspect, which was scaling irregularly when used on a two-handed weapon. After that, let's talk about the Rogue. A couple of shifts to basic skill functionalities, nothing really big there at all. Enhanced Caltrops now provides minimum 10% increased damage to enemies inside of its radius, with 5% damage increase per second on top of that. This is a pretty sizable Caltrops buff compared to what it was before, and it'll definitely see some more use because of this as a result in this season. Cold Imbuement scales chill better now, and blended Cold Imbuement no longer requires crits. Mixed Poison Imbuement has been shifted completely, now giving 30% lucky hit chance to reduce Poison Imbuement's cooldown by 2 seconds, which is actually a pretty damn solid change. Forceful Arrow now has increased vulnerable duration. Enhanced Penetrating Shot has been given, changing just on a more basic level, now giving it 10% increased crit chance in general, and giving your player as a whole a 10% crit chance bonus for 5 seconds if Penetrating Shot hits 3 or more enemies. An improved Penetrating Shot now has the old enhanced effect, dealing 10% increased damage per enemy that it hits. Then we have changes to Rogue passives, Close Quarters Combat getting a massive nerf in its crowd control damage conversion, but an increase in attack speed per stack, and Precision getting some much larger changes. Every marksman skill grants a precision stack, crits give 2. When you reach 6 stacks, your next marksman or ultimate skill is guaranteed to crit with 50% increased damage multiplier consuming your stacks, and it also converts 15% of your normal crit damage bonus into more damage on this, so this should be actually really quite strong. I look forward to seeing ranged Rogue in the season for sure. Then we have Chilling Weight gaining some chill effect bonuses, and Concussive getting a massive change to give you bonus crit chance in general as a character, rather than just only to the one target enemy, which is actually a pretty big change right there. Then we have one Paragon change for Rogue, specifically to the Leyrana's Instinct legendary node. When Inner Sight's gauge is full, you get 100% dodge chance for 2 seconds now, and now also your next 3 core skills deal additional damage equal to 20% of your core skill damage bonus, so a pretty significant buff to this node here too. Then let's talk about the Rogue bug fixes. Lower the flags to half-mast because the Tybalt's Will bug is now fixed. No longer are we able to increase Rogue's maximum combo points by like 20, which is sad times for everyone. Then we also had a nerf to the interaction between Blade Dancer's aspect and Poison Imbuement, so a bit of a hit to Twisting Blades in general, then just some more particular fixes. Then we have our final class of the day, Sorcerer. Ball Lightning's enhancement has had its damage bonus cap reduced significantly to try and bring this back into a reasonable position. Mage's Blizzard no longer has a mana requirement condition, and Lightning Spear now just applies vulnerable with critical hits in general, which is fantastic to see, as everyone should just have more options to apply vulnerable. I feel like that just makes every class feel better when they do. Then just some Paragon shifts, purely statistical and numerical moves here, but the Elemental Summoner buff here, it's worth saying, will be a lot more in practice than it looks like just seeing the small number on this screen, so that should actually be pretty meaty. Then we just have a number of Sorcerer bug fixes as well, including fixing Ball Lightning's bugged interactions on top of the general nerf that they gave it as a skill, and then just a really big nerf actually is changing the Static Surge legendary node to no longer trigger from the Chain Lightning enhancement, as that was a massive source of resource generation for Sorcerer before now. Past that then, we just have some changes to the game on a larger scale, Helltide changes that we've talked about quite a bit. They've also increased the drop rate of Distilled Fear so that you can summon the Beast and Ice boss more frequently. They've also changed the item power drop rates a bit for each of the endgame ladder bosses so that you theoretically get better stuff from them now in general. And they've done the same for Nightmare Dungeons too, with tier 90 and above dungeons now guaranteed, dropping nothing but 925 item power gear, which is of course great for people who want to farm that stuff out. And that just about does it then, everyone. Quite the hefty package of patch notes. I tried to break them down as concisely as I possibly could, while also running the larger changes against my own knowledge banks to try and give you the lowdown on the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to the changes for each class coming in with Season 3. I look forward to seeing you all out there in Sanctuary next week. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.